Padlet is one of the first tools that got me really excited about how I could use technology to enhance my teaching. And in this video, I'm going to show you 10 ideas for how you could use it. I'll show you some tips for how you can use Padlet as an online collaborative workspace, and I'll also share some ideas about how you could use Padlet for project-based learning. Padlet is a really powerful program for online learning, and there's a lot of functionality we can squeeze out of it. So I'm excited to show you a lot of different ways that you can use it. My name is Sam Carey, and this is my YouTube channel for the New EdTech Classroom. One question that comes up a lot about Padlet is how to use the free version if you have lots of different classes. Admittedly, the strategies that I'm going to show in this video will be more challenging if you're only using the free version. Though one way to get around that is to have students create their own accounts, because then they'll also get 3 boards that they can use as well. But if you plan to use it all the time as your go-to workspace, you may want to consider buying the premium version. And lastly, if you're looking for more of an overview of how to use Padlet, I'd suggest that you check my other video out and then watch this one to get some ideas about some different ways you could use it with your students. The first strategy is to set up what I call a no words challenge for students. So to start, I'll go ahead and select the wall option for this board. So the basic idea with the no words challenge is that students have to respond to a prompt, but they have to use media types other than text. And the idea here is to get them thinking in other ways, but also to help them practice using some of the different multimedia tools that are available in Padlet. So let's say that we taught a lesson about the different parts of a cell. One possibility for a no words post would be for students to find an image of a cell and then post that image to the board. And another option would be for students to use the drawing tool, and then they could sketch out some of the different parts of a cell that they had learned about. You can use this no words challenge for lots of different types of quick prompts, and it's a fun way to mix up the way that you use this tool. The second tip is to use Padlet to set up small group discussions. I'll show you why in just a moment, but it would be ideal to split up your class into 4 different groups for this type of activity. Obviously, to create 4 Padlet boards at the same time, you're either going to need a premium account, or what you could do is have students create the board, share it with their group mates and you, and that would be one way to get around that. So what I'm going to do here is set up a post with a prompt that students would need to discuss. So I'll make a prompt here for students to discuss whether or not cell phones should be allowed in schools. Then I'm going to use the search function to find a relevant video so that students can watch it and base their discussion on that piece of media. Once I have the board set up the way that I want it, I'm going to go up here to the 3-dot menu, scroll down to remake, and that's essentially going to allow me to duplicate the board. I'll select the box to copy over all the posts that are currently on this board so that it creates an exact replica. And I'll repeat this process 3 times so that I end up with 4 separate boards. Then you'll need to assign students a particular group and share the board with the students that are in that group. So let's say that this is a live lesson and I want to be able to monitor what students are doing live. What I can do is use the Tab Resize Chrome extension, and that will allow me to create a grid of 4 different tabs so that I can monitor each Padlet room at exactly the same time. So now when students start adding to their group's Padlet, I'll be able to observe all the posts as they're coming in live. The third tip is to use Padlet for mind mapping. To make a mind map, you'll want to select the Canvas tool. So let's say that students just had that small group conversation about whether or not cell phones should be allowed in schools. What you could do here is add a post with that question. Then with the Canvas tool, you can drag the Padlet post around wherever you want it to go on the board. Then students could add different posts with pieces of evidence. Once those posts have been created, they can also be dragged around anywhere on the board. And then by clicking on the drop-down menu, you can also connect posts together. So you can connect this piece of evidence back with the original proposition. So if a student were to put up this post that students should be allowed to use cell phones because they're already a part of everyday life, and then another student wanted to add a more specific point or a point that elaborated on that piece of evidence, they could add another post and then connect that post as well. So this mind mapping activity could be done as a whole group, as a small group, or potentially as just an individual activity if a student has their own Padlet account, which they can create for free. The fourth tip is to use Padlet to practice digital citizenship skills. So to do this, I'm going to set up the shelf option. So what I'm going to do here is set up a few different sources, and I'm going to have my students identify whether or not those sources are credible or not. This is a really important activity to have students do whenever they're researching online, and you could essentially repeat it over and over with different topics that you're having students learn about. So what I'll do here is use the insert link tool, and then I'll bring in some different URLs of websites in order to have my students evaluate whether or not those different sources are reliable or not. And then as they're collecting their own sources for the topic that you're researching, they can start to put those in the relevant column, either saying that they think that they found a source that's reliable or that they found one that's unreliable. An activity like this will also just help you pull together a bunch of different sources in one place that students could come back to and reference if they need some more information for what they're researching. The fifth tip is a related strategy, and that's to use Padlet to have students revise writing. So let's say that we are working on adding more variety in our sentence types. Here we might teach students how to write a complex sentence. So what I could do here is set this up as essentially a scaffolded assignment where I'm going to start by giving students phrases that they would need to build upon in order to complete a complex sentence. Once students have the hang of the revision process, they can move on to writing their own complex sentences on the columns that are further to the right. Then I could also add a challenge element here so that if some students were ready to move on, they would be able to do that while still practicing the skill that we're working on. Tip number 6 is that you could use Padlet to have students show their work for math problems. So just like I did with the last few Padlets, I'll also set this one up as a shelf. And I'm going to label the first column problem number 1. If you just wanted students to practice basic math facts here that didn't require more advanced math language, you could obviously just type that directly into the column or as a separate post underneath the column. But if you need actual math language, there's a way that we can use the Hypatia extension to bring that in. So what I'm going to do here is go over to Google Forms. And in order for this to work, you're going to need to make sure that you have the Hypatia add-on for Google Forms. Once you've gotten that add-on, it's going to show up in the drop-down menu. In Google Forms, you can open up the math editor, and then you can use the math language tools to create the equation that you need. Once you've finished creating the equation, it's actually going to generate a URL link that you can copy. So what I'll do here is copy the link to this math equation. Then I'm going to return to Padlet, and I'll open up the link tool and paste that same URL in. And now you'll see that that just brought that image in of the math equation that you just created. Now, after you've posted this equation, you could have students use the drawing tool, and then they could draw out all the steps to the problem. I do recognize that this is going to be a little bit challenging because essentially I'm just drawing this with the mouse cursor, but I still think it works pretty well. And if you wanted, you could make sure to set up the settings so that you have to approve the posts before they come through so that students aren't able to see each other's responses before they post their answer. Idea number 7 is that you could set up a Padlet board to provide students with tech support. So for this one, I'll go ahead and choose the wall board again. And then the purpose of this board will be for students to post screen recordings of issues that they might be having with technology. You have some different options for how students could bring those screen recordings in. One would be to use the internal screen recording tool inside of Padlet. In order to use the screen recorder, students would need to have the Padlet Chrome extension added to their browsers. Oftentimes, students are blocked from being able to do this, so you might have to have your tech department push the Padlet extension out to browsers if they're willing to do that. So if you're able to make that work, all students will need to do is select the screen record option, and then just like any other screen recorder, they can record a part of their screen and explain an issue that they're having. So let's just say that a student were having some trouble logging into a Flipgrid assignment. They might record that and explain the issue that they're having so that you're able to help them out. An aspect of online learning that can be really challenging is the inability to provide students with in-the-moment support. So this can be a way that you can get a better idea of exactly what's happening on the student end so that you can help them and make sure that they're able to move forward with the different assignments that you're giving them. Number 8 is to have students make digital maps in Padlet. You could do this as a collaborative activity, although it's probably best if you have students just create their own accounts and then make their own maps. After you've selected the map board, you'll see that there's some different map styles that you can choose from. And then once you or your students have picked a style that you want, you can create new posts that are going to be based on specific locations on the map. Students can either drop pins on the map or they can search for a specific location that they're looking for. So let's just say that we were doing a project where students were tracking important locations along the Silk Road. They could search for some of those locations and then write a description about why that place is important. Then students can continue to add new pins on their map. And in addition to text, they could also bring another picture in as a way to supplement what they're trying to show in the post. So here you'll see that there are 3 pins created, and you could click on each pin in order to see more detail about what's in that post. We can also connect those pins to show the relationship between places. So here you could envision how a student could create an entire map with all the important locations of the Silk Road and then string them all together to indicate the relationship between those places. The 9th tip is to make a timeline project with Padlet. Just like the map tool, this is probably going to work best if students have their own accounts. So what they would do is choose the timeline tool, and then they can click on the add button below to add different events along the timeline. So one way you could do this would be a type of community building activity where you had students make personal life timelines. So I could start here by saying that I was born in San Francisco in 1982 and also add an image as a visual cue. And then in order to add new events, just click on the add button to the right of the timeline, and you can continue to enter different posts that would go on the timeline. The 10th tip is to use Padlet to have students make audio recordings or podcast episodes. For this one, I'll just set up a regular wall and have students all post their audio recordings in one place. So one idea is that you could have students conduct an interview with a family member about their family history. They could record that conversation by using the audio recorder tool. And then after they finish that interview, they could post their recording to Padlet so that all the other students in the class could listen to it as well. So this would be a great way to introduce students to audio recording and podcasting without going full bore and teaching students how to use audio recording software. You can probably tell that I really like using this tool, and I'd love to hear about some other ways that teachers are creatively using Padlet if you want to share those in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching my video to the end. If you found the tips that I shared helpful, please share it with other teachers that you know, hit the like button, and subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell to make sure you don't miss any of my weekly updates. You can also check out some of the other tutorials I have on my channel by clicking on one of those 2 videos above. And if you're interested in downloading any of the resources that I've created and show on my videos, please visit my website at www.newedtechclassroom.com. Lastly, if you want to check me out on social media, my Twitter handle, Facebook page, and Pinterest account are all in the description below. Thanks so much and have a great week.